The stench of death and defeat clung to the stones of Jaffa. The standards of Sultan Saladin fluttered over the broken walls, a testament to the fury of his army and the near-total annihilation of the Crusader garrison. Within the citadel, the last bastion, a handful of men prepared to die. Their prayers had become funeral rites, their hope a trampled ember beneath the weight of 40,000 soldiers awaiting the final order to wipe their existence from the map. The very air was charged with the certainty of the end, the bloody conclusion of a crusade that had reached the gates of Jerusalem only to now crumble in coastal shame. The kingdom of Jerusalem, and with it the Christian dream in the Holy Land, was about to draw its last breath amidst dust and rubble. From the citadel's battlements, the eyes of the damned scanned the blue horizon of the Mediterranean, searching for a salvation they knew was impossible. And then, they saw it. It was no mirage born of desperation, but a vision so illogical that for a moment it seemed a divine mockery. A flotilla of ships, no more than a handful, sailing directly into the heart of the most powerful army in the East. It was not a relief force, it was a naval suicide. To Saladin's soldiers thronging the beach, the sight first brought confusion, then arrogant laughter. What madness was this? What paltry force dared challenge a lion at its own feast? The scene was absurd, a challenge so disproportionate it defied all military logic, a moth flying straight into a world-consuming bonfire. But then, absurdity transformed into astonishment, and astonishment into panic. From the flagship, a towering figure did not wait for ramps to lower or for the keel to kiss the sand. Wielding a Danish axe that seemed an extension of his own fury, King Richard I of England, the Lionheart, leaped overboard and sank waist-deep into the waves. He did not send his men, he led them, carving a path through the water like an incarnation of vengeance. The Lion King had come ashore, not to negotiate or to retreat, but to personally confront an army of thousands with only a handful of followers. In that instant, the battle for Jaffa ceased to be a matter of numbers and became a legend forged in the steel and indomitable will of a single man. At the head of this madness sailed a monarch forged in the crucible of war, Richard III of England, the Lionheart. But this was not the triumphant Richard of Arsuf. This was a king haunted by ghosts. The frustration of having failed to take Jerusalem, the poison of news of treason and conspiracy in his lands across the sea. He was on the verge of abandoning the crusade, of accepting a bitter peace and returning to a crumbling kingdom. The news of Jaffa's fall was not just a strategic setback, it was a personal insult, a stain upon his legacy. The fury it awoke in him was not that of a king, but of a cornered warrior, a wounded lion choosing to die fighting. His relief force was a macabre joke. A mere 55 knights, a few hundred infantrymen, and 2,000 Genoese and Pisan crossbowmen. A force so ridiculously small, its only purpose seemed to be martyrdom. On the coast, observing with a confidence bordering on disdain, stood An-Nasir Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, the legendary Saladin. The Sultan, a consummate strategist and unifier of the Islamic world, sought revenge. The humiliation of his defeat at Arsuf still burned in his memory, and he saw Richard's imminent departure as the golden opportunity to deliver the killing blow. For Saladin, the war was all but over. His vast Ayyubid army, a human tide of up to 40,000 men, was a war machine perfectly adapted to the terrain. Its core was formed by light cavalry and horse archers, capable of maneuvering, harassing, and annihilating their enemies on the open plains. Jaffa was the epilogue to his great victory, the final act where he would sweep the last Frankish vestiges from the coast and consolidate his absolute dominion over the Holy Land. Saladin's fatal arrogance, however, became his Achilles' heel. His military genius was blinded by a fundamental belief that Richard's spirit was broken. He saw him as a king in retreat, psychologically defeated and eager to escape. This colossal underestimation led him to make a catastrophic error. Instead of consolidating his position and preparing a disciplined defense against a possible, however unlikely, counterattack, he allowed his emirs and soldiers to indulge in the plunder of Jaffa. Discipline relaxed, cohesion fractured, and the vast army devolved into a disorganized mob, more interested in booty than in battle. They believed the lion was leaving with his tail between his legs, never imagining that he was, in fact, about to launch himself at their throats with suicidal ferocity. The battlefield was the port of Jaffa, a strategic jewel on the Palestinian coast. For the Crusaders, the geography was a death trap. The beach became an exposed landing zone, a bottleneck where their small force could be massacred before even forming ranks. The city walls, brought down by Saladin's siege engines, no longer offered refuge. They were a reminder of their vulnerability. Yet, in the hands of a tactical genius, weakness can become a weapon. Richard would transform that exposed beach into the stage for his most audacious assault, and he would use the very ruins of the walls to channel and bleed his enemy's cavalry. The terrain, which should have guaranteed Saladin's victory, became an active character, a silent accomplice in the most brilliant and unpredictable maneuver of the Third Crusade. The sand of Jaffa was stained red with the blood of the first Ayyubid defenders, who fled not so much from the force of Crusader arms, but from the sheer psychological terror inspired by the sight of the English king fighting among them like a sea demon. Richard and his minuscule force had retaken the city, or rather, what was left of it. But this initial victory was like plugging a small crack in a dam about to burst. They were now ashore, with the sea at their backs and an ocean of enemies before them. Saladin's army, recovered from the initial shock, was regrouping on the plains outside the city. Their numbers so overwhelming they looked like a forest of spears and standards moving with a contained fury. The handful of Crusaders had not won a battle. They had only bought themselves a ticket to a siege in reverse. Trapped in a ruined city by a force that could devour them at will, any sane commander would have barricaded himself in the citadel, using every stone as a shield to prolong the inevitable agony. But Richard was no sane commander. He was a force of nature. In an act of audacity that bordered on madness, he ordered his men to set up camp outside the broken walls, in the open field, as if directly daring Saladin to come and get them. It was a play of psychological warfare at its finest. A bluff played with the lives of all his men. Saladin, seeing this, could not believe his enemy's arrogance and swore to annihilate them at dawn. The stage was set for the final slaughter. Before the sun rises to witness history being written in blood and steel, secure your front row seat, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and activate notifications, because the carnage that is about to be unleashed is the stuff of immortal legends. On August 1st, 1192, military logic was shattered on the beach of Jaffa. Richard the Lionheart did not wait to secure a beachhead. He was the beachhead. By leaping into the water, followed by his minuscule elite force, he transformed a landing operation into an amphibious cavalry charge. The psychological impact was cataclysmic. Saladin's troops, scattered and busy with plunder, faced not an organized army, but the concentrated fury of a demon king emerging from the waves. Richard's Danish axe carved through the defenders, each blow a hammer strike against the enemy's morale. The Ayyubid soldiers, who moments before had been laughing at the insignificant fleet, now dropped their loot and fled in terror, screaming a single phrase that spread like wildfire: Malik Rik. King Richard is here. The flight from the beach was a stampede. It was not a tactical withdrawal, but a rout driven by a superstitious terror. Saladin's men were not defeated by numerical or strategic superiority, but by the incredulity of what they were witnessing. To see the most famous monarch in Christendom fighting in the vanguard, soaked in salt water and blood, was a vision that broke all paradigms of medieval warfare. Inspired by this act of suicidal leadership, the Christian defenders trapped in the citadel felt new hope course through their veins. They launched a counterattack from within, and in a matter of hours, the tide of battle had turned completely. The city, which had cost Saladin days of siege and thousands of men, was reconquered by a handful of brave men led by the indomitable will of their king. After the euphoria of the reconquest came the harsh reality. Richard controlled a ruined city, defended by a force barely reaching 2,000 men, many of them sailors and crossbowmen unsuited for a pitched battle. Outside, Saladin's army, numbering in the tens of thousands, was recovering from the initial shock, its shame transforming into a murderous thirst for vengeance. In a move that defied all prudence, Richard ordered his men to camp outside the walls, on the plain, deliberately exposing themselves to the full might of Saladin's cavalry. It was a bluff of epic proportions, a direct challenge meant to shout to the world that he was not afraid. Saladin, seeing that tiny force camped so arrogantly, took it as the final insult and prepared a massive dawn assault to wipe them from the face of the earth. The morning of August 5th arrived with a reddish sun that foretold the blood about to be spilled. The horizon darkened. not with clouds, but with the mass of the Ayyubid army advancing like a plague of steel locusts. The thunder of thousands of hooves on the dry earth was a sound that heralded apocalypse for the small Crusader force. Richard, however, had not been idle. He had turned his desperate position into a makeshift fortress. The sight of the Crusaders, standing silently, awaiting the impact, was that of a group of martyrs ready for their sacrifice. But beneath that apparent calm lay a tactical genius that was about to neutralize Saladin's greatest advantage, his overwhelming superiority in cavalry. The trap was set. Richard's invention was as simple as it was lethal, a formation his enemies would call the Steel Hedgehog. He ordered his heavy infantry to kneel in the first rank, driving their shields into the sand before them to create an improvised wall. They then angled their spears forward, the butts planted firmly in the ground, creating a barrier of angled steel points perfectly designed to impale any charging horse. Directly behind this impenetrable wall of lances, he placed his Genoese crossbowmen, who could fire their deadly bolts over the heads of their comrades with complete protection. This formation turned his small infantry into an impregnable phalanx, a static bastion designed to break and bleed the waves of enemy cavalry. The first charge was led by Saladin's elite Mamluks, the cream of his army, horsemen who considered themselves invincible. They charged with a deafening cry, expecting to crush the Christian infantry under their hooves in a matter of seconds. The impact was brutal. The horses, unable to stop, impaled themselves on the forest of spears, their screams of agony mingling with those of their riders. At the same instant, a shower of crossbow bolts rained down upon the following ranks, piercing leather armor and mail coifs with terrifying ease. The charge, which was meant to be a hammer blow, smashed against an anvil of steel and shattered. The Mamluks, shocked and decimated, retreated in disarray, leaving a pile of dead men and horses before the Crusader line. Saladin, furious at the initial failure, ordered a second charge and then a third. Each time, the result was the same. Wave after wave of light cavalry, horse archers, and Turkish troops crashed against the wall of spears, only to be repelled and riddled by the crossbowmen. The genius of Richard's formation lay in its simplicity and its discipline. The Crusaders did not move. They absorbed the impact, held the line, and let the enemy destroy itself against their defenses. The battlefield before them became a slaughterhouse, a gruesome tangle of dead horses and wounded men that served as an additional barrier, further hindering subsequent charges. The Ayyubid army's morale began to crack with the frustration of being unable to break that seemingly insignificant formation. For hours, the battle became a bloody stalemate. The Crusaders were exhausted, dehydrated under the scorching sun, but their resolve was unbreakable. And at the center of it all, like a colossus, was Richard himself. He moved tirelessly on foot along the line, wielding his sword, shouting words of encouragement, plugging any gap that threatened to open. His physical presence was the anchor that held the formation together. Chroniclers tell that he fought with the ferocity of a common soldier, his royal armor dented and stained with blood. To his men, he was not just a king, he was a god of war fighting by their side, and for such a leader, they were willing to die to the last man. This personal connection was the fuel that sustained the impossible resistance. The role of the Genoese crossbowmen in this engagement cannot be overstated. Shielded by the wall of spears, they operated with lethal mechanical efficiency. As Saladin's cavalry swirled, searching for a weak point, the crossbowmen unleashed disciplined, constant volleys. Each bolt was a projectile capable of piercing the light armor of the Saracen riders at a considerable distance. It was they who inflicted the greatest number of casualties, turning every failed charge into a massacre. The combination of the spearmen's passive defense and the crossbowmen's active offense created a perfect killing zone. Saladin's great army, designed for mobile warfare and hit-and-run tactics, was tactically impotent against this static fortress. After several hours of withstanding incessant charges, Richard sensed a change in the air. The fury of the enemy attacks had waned, replaced by a palpable hesitation. The morale of Saladin's troops was at its lowest point. They were tired of dying uselessly against that wall of steel. It was then that Richard knew the time for defense was over and the time for legend had arrived. He knew his small force could not hold out forever. He needed a final blow, an act so bold, so unexpected, that it would completely shatter the enemy's will to fight. He gathered by his side the few knights who still had mounts, no more than 15, along with some infantry leaders. He was about to make the most reckless move of his life. With a cry that echoed across the battlefield, Richard the Lionheart personally led the charge. This tiny contingent of knights, with the king at their head, launched itself directly into the heart of Saladin's army, an act that was not merely brave, but insane. The Ayyubid troops, already demoralized, saw this small wedge of steel galloping toward them, and their minds could not process it. The only logical explanation for such a suicidal attack was that it could not be a suicidal attack. It must be the vanguard of a massive relief army that had arrived from nowhere. Panic, born of disbelief and the superstitious terror that Richard's name already inspired, seized their ranks. Richard's charge was the psychological coup de grace, the front lines of Saladin's army, which had held for hours of combat, simply dissolved. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled. Discipline evaporated, and the vast army became a terrified mob. Richard and his knights rode through the enemy ranks like reapers through wheat, legend telling that the king himself cut a path almost to Saladin's personal tent. The Sultan, watching his army collapse into a humiliating rout, was forced to flee for his own life. The battle was over. A handful of men, led by the superhuman audacity of their king, had not only held their ground, but had put to flight one of the largest and most feared armies in the known world. The silence that descended upon the battlefield of Jaffa was more deafening than the clamor of combat. Where a forest of Ayyubid standards once stood, now only a landscape of carnage and abandonment remained. The casualty count revealed a story that defied all martial logic and bordered on the miraculous. On the Crusader side, the chronicles record an almost unbelievable figure: only 2 men killed. Though many were wounded, the lethality of Saladin's attack had been virtually nullified by Richard's tactical genius. In contrast, the field was strewn with the bodies of approximately 700 of Saladin's soldiers. And perhaps most devastating for an army built on mobility, the loss of more than 1,500 horses. The disparity was not just a victory, it was a mathematical humiliation, a brutal testament to how discipline and leadership could annihilate brute force. For Saladin, the undefeated Sultan, the unifier of Islam, the retreat from Jaffa was the most bitter defeat of his life. It was not merely a military setback, it was a personal blow to his prestige and his aura of invincibility, especially against his arch-nemesis, Richard. He was forced to fall back, to watch from a distance as a handful of infidels celebrated their survival in a port he had considered his own. The confidence of his emirs was shattered, and the cohesion of his vast coalition, always fragile, began to show cracks. The defeat at Jaffa forced him to accept a reality he had been avoiding. He could not drive Richard from the Holy Land by force. The lion had roared one last time, and its echo had broken the Sultan's will. The battle left both sides in a state of utter exhaustion. The Crusaders, though victorious, were too few to exploit their success and march inland. Saladin's army, though still numerically superior, was morally shattered and refused to face Richard again in open battle. The bloody aftermath of Jaffa created a stalemate, a tacit acknowledgement that neither could completely destroy the other. This mutual exhaustion, born from the most improbable of victories, was what finally opened the door to the only remaining solution: peace. The blood spilled on the sands of Jaffa had not conquered Jerusalem, but it had purchased the survival of the Crusader kingdom, setting the stage for the end of the Third Crusade. The most immediate and lasting political consequence of the Battle of Jaffa was the signing of the treaty that bears its name. Signed on September 2, 1192. The Treaty of Jaffa was a compromise born of the mutual respect forged on the battlefield. Although for many Crusaders it was a disappointment, as Jerusalem remained under Muslim control, it was in reality a monumental strategic victory. The agreement guaranteed the Christians uninterrupted control of a vital coastal strip stretching from Tyre to Jaffa itself. This chain of ports ensured that the Kingdom of Jerusalem, though reduced, could survive, trade, and receive reinforcements from Europe. More importantly, it guaranteed unarmed Christian pilgrims the right to visit the holy sites in Jerusalem in peace, fulfilling, at least in spirit, one of the key objectives of the crusade. The treaty, in essence, secured the existence of the Kingdom of Jerusalem for another century. Without Jaffa, the kingdom would have been strangled. deprived of its main port and its connection to the Western world. Richard's victory acted as a defibrillator on the dying heart of the Crusader state, giving it a new lease on life. This outcome proved that the Third Crusade, despite its failures and internal strife, was not in vain. It saved the Crusader states from the total collapse that had seemed imminent after the catastrophic Battle of Hattin and the fall of Jerusalem. The echo of Richard's charge at Jaffa resonated in the courts of Europe, ensuring that the flame of the Crusader cause in the Holy Land, though flickering, would not be extinguished. Beyond geopolitics, the Battle of Jaffa forever cemented the legend of Richard the Lionheart. It became the archetypal example of the underdog victory, the definitive tale of how the personal courage and genius of a single man could defy and overcome impossible odds. The chronicles, both Christian and Muslim, were captivated by the story. To the Christians, Richard was the new David who had defeated Goliath, the embodiment of the perfect knight. To the Muslims, despite being his enemy, he became a figure of grudging respect, an adversary so formidable that his own biographer, Baha ad-Din, described him with a mixture of awe and admiration, highlighting his audacity and martial prowess. Jaffa transformed him from a king into a myth. The cultural impact of this battle was immense. The story of the king leaping into the water, the formation of the spear wall, the desperate charge against a massive army, all these elements became the stuff of ballads, epic poems, and chivalric romances for centuries. The battle became a lesson in leadership, demonstrating that a true commander leads from the front, that audacity can be a weapon as potent as any sword, and that war is won not just with numbers, but with the ability to inspire and to break an adversary's morale. The name Richard the Lionheart was etched into history not just as a king of England, but as the epitome of the warrior king, a standard against which all future martial monarchs would be measured, thanks in large part to the events of a single bloody day on a forgotten beach. At the height of the final battle, when dust and sweat clouded the vision and the clash of steel was the only language, Richard the Lionheart found himself fighting on foot. His horse had fallen from under him, but his fury had not abated. He fought like a cornered lion, surrounded by enemies, his great sword carving a circle of death around him. From a nearby hill, observing the combat, was not Saladin, but his brother, Al-Adil, also known as Safadin. Seeing the incredible bravery of his enemy, a king fighting like a common soldier without asking for quarter, Al-Adil felt not hatred, but a profound warrior's admiration. He considered it a shame that a man of such nobility and courage should be forced to fight in so undignified a position, like a simple pawn. Moved by this code of chivalric honor that often transcended religious lines in the era of the Crusades, Al-Adil made a decision that would go down in history as one of the most extraordinary gestures of medieval warfare. He sent a servant through the chaos of battle with a message and a gift. The servant made his way to the English king and presented him with 2 magnificent Arabian war horses, fresh and ready for combat. Al-Adil's message was simple. A king so great should not fight on foot. Richard, surprised but never lacking in audacity, accepted his enemy's gift, mounted one of the steeds, and with renewed vigor, threw himself back into the heart of the fray. This act, a flash of mutual respect in the midst of the most savage butchery, encapsulates the legend of Jaffa, a battle won not only with steel, but with a spirit so indomitable that even your enemies are compelled to honor it.